You're listening to the Renegade Blitz podcast, a podcast for Steelers fans by Steelers fans. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, read articles on renegadeblitz.com, and like us on Facebook. And welcome back to the Renegade Blitz podcast. I'm Polk, joined by Chris Ward, and it's time for another preview podcast, Steelers versus Bengals. The big story this week as we go into this podcast is the reserve COVID list for the Steelers. Right now, 6 players, including Vance McDonald and Ben Roethlisberger, are currently on this list. And Chris, what started last week as just a staff member for the Steelers testing positive for COVID-19 has emerged into the players' room. Any more details?
On Monday, it was announced that, Vance McDonald tested positive for COVID-19, and he was placed on the reserve COVID-19 list. From the Post-Gazette, I know they reported that, obviously McDonald traveled with the team to Dallas, and he played 20 snaps against the Cowboys. And I guess he sat next to Ben on the plane, and they were wearing masks and everything, but that's who and his locker room, I guess, is next to. But on Tuesday morning, it was reported that Ben Roethlisberger, Gerald Hawkins, Jalen Samuels, and Vince Williams were in close contact with McDonald, and they were placed on the reserve COVID-19 list as well. So, McDonald, he'll be out this week. The 4 other players, they'll still have to test every day, but they can't be at the facility. So if they pass all their tests and are good to go for Saturday, if everything's good, they can rejoin the team. And Tomlin said that they could play on Sunday, especially the veteran players like Ben Roethlisberger and Vince Williams he's comfortable with.
And Roethlisberger came away from that Dallas game with a couple injuries. He had 2 knee injuries, apparently caught up in the turf down at E18 Stadium. And so maybe this will be good for him to get a little bit of rest. But also, the last time he came into a game with no practice reps, it was against Cleveland. He threw for nearly 400 yards. Of course, it's a different situation for Ben then, but at least could be a positive out of this situation for the Steelers. And Chris, you also have more updates on the injury list for the Steelers. Tyson Alualu and Mike Hilton were back in practice.
Yeah, Alualu, he was limited, but Mike Hilton and Derek Watt, who both missed the game against the Cowboys, they were full participants today. So, that's a good sign for hopefully them playing on Sunday. I know that hamstring injury for Derek Watt has been kind of like a nagging injury.
Well, hopefully his involvement in the offense will improve the running game for the Steelers. But Chris, lost in our podcast earlier this week, we failed to mention that Mike Tomlin has now posted his 14th consecutive non-losing season, tying an NFL record.
Yeah, he secured his 14th straight non-losing season, and he tied Marty Schottenheimer for the most consecutive seasons to not have a losing record to start an NFL coaching career. And Schottenheimer did that when he was with the Kansas City Chiefs from 1989 to 1998.
So it's great to see that, especially after last season in which it was a hopeless situation and almost you were just hoping that the quarterback play would at least not kill us, in the words of Mike Tomlin. And certainly it's great to see that he's still continuing that Hall of Fame streak.
The worst record that the Steelers have had under Tomlin is 8-8, which they've been on 3 occasions, 2012, 2013, and 2019. And, the Steelers have not had a losing season since 2003. So, Steeler fans in that aspect, we're kind of spoiled in a way, to have Tomlin as our head coach.
Yes, we are. And now it's time to talk about our opponents for the next game, the Cincinnati Bengals. And we're joined by Lindsay Patterson, Bengals reporter for the Cincinnati Inquirer. Lindsay, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you, Tyler?
I'm doing good. So Mike Tomlin calls this division the AFC North Kitchen, and with the recent history between the Bengals and the Steelers, it's arguably the most heated rivalry in the division. With a second-year head coach in Zach Taylor and a number 1 pick in Joe Burrow, it feels like a new chapter for the Bengals. They're never an easy opponent for the Steelers. However, the Steelers have won 10 straight against them and haven't lost to the Bengals since 2015. What have the players said about this opportunity to face the unbeaten Steelers?
You know what? It's crazy because you can look at the past history and just see that heated rivalry with the Cincinnati Bengals and the Steelers. But to be completely honest, I feel like this locker room looks a little different. It's some of the young guys in there, and some of them haven't experienced it. You have a lot of young rookies, including quarterback Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Logan Wilson on the defensive side, some of the younger free agents that they did bring in the offseason. So I think this rivalry feels a little bit different. I'm sure the heat's still going to be there, but the atmosphere is going to be different because you're not going to have that Heinz Field crowd, that atmosphere that some of these guys are used to playing on the road against. But I haven't heard anything different, but a lot of the guys know the rivalry is it's a huge one going into this game.
And Lindsay, one of Cincinnati's biggest pieces for the future is obviously Joe Burrow. He's having some stellar rookie quarterback play. You know, he's probably the front runner for Offensive Rookie of the Year as of right now. In terms of active quarterbacks, he leads the league in pass attempts per game while completing 67% of his passes and has a 2-to-1 touchdown interception ratio. How are the Bengals feeling about his development with, COVID limited training camp and, there was no preseason games?
I think you can look at what he's been able to do. And as you mentioned, no preseason games, and their whole entire offseason was pretty much a virtual getting to know his teammates. And a lot of his players joked as soon as he was drafted, he was yelling the cadence in his parents' basement because he was living with his parents in Athens. So that's a little different for a first round pick, but that's what Joe Burrow did. He's very vocal. He said he really didn't want to come in and kind of be that leader right away. He wanted to earn it. And he really feels like he can go in there. And some of the players, some of the veterans, even Gio Bernard, who's been out there and producing a lot while Joe Mixon had been sidelined, he said, when we're in the huddle, we always feel like we have a chance with Joe Burrow, and you can really see the confidence he's getting. And you guys have seen some of their offensive line play. It's been up and down, a little bit of musical chairs. They're dealing with injuries, and he's still been able to produce. And I think that's what you look at in a quarterback and see this guy, he can be the future just, halfway through the season.
Yeah, but one thing that the rookie quarterbacks have always been challenged by is the Steelers' defense. They are 22-4 against rookie quarterbacks since Tomlin took over in 2007. And one of the constants in those wins was the pass rush, and it's no different this time. Burrow's been sacked 28 times, the second most in the league. I know the Bengals have been dealing with a lot of these injuries on the offensive line, as you mentioned. But what has been the other issues with the offensive line, and how could they compete against this league-leading pass rush?
I think when you look at this matchup, and I said it in our preview on Cincinnati.com, that the defense is what scares me with this Pittsburgh Steelers team. It's the main reason I feel they're undefeated. You can look at their offensive weapons, some exciting stuff they have going on offensively. And of course they have Big Ben, but defensively, I think that's scary. And Joe Burrow knows he has to go against that. Look, their offensive line played okay against the Tennessee Titans. The Tennessee Titans didn't really have that pass rush or a D line that was really threatening the Bengals offense and their backup offensive line who they had to play. That's one thing that Joe Burrow, some negatives. He has to get rid of the ball sooner, and he knows that. And one of the things we really noticed from Joe Burrow after 8 games is he doesn't make the same mistake twice. And some of the interceptions, I'm sure he would like back, and I think that's the biggest thing. If he doesn't turn the ball over, they have a chance in this game. But that Steelers defense is going to make it tough on him.
In the Carlos Dunlap trade to Seattle, the team acquired former Steelers lineman B.J. Finney. Has he been in that lineup in any facet, or how's he been doing in Cincinnati so far?
It's funny you mentioned it. It's such a bizarre year. We actually talked to Zach Taylor about him today. And with them being on bye week last week and only getting tests every day, but not seeing each other. And of course, they're dealing with their first cases of COVID since the NFL season started. So he really hasn't had a chance to see him out there at practice. Their practices have been really walkthroughs. They've been trying to keep that social distancing because of some of the outbreaks. So it's been kind of a different week. To be completely honest, when you think of some of the guard play and who they brought in, Quentin Spain, it's such a bizarre story because right before their bye week, they played the Tennessee Titans. They find out at 10 a.m. that their starting guard can't play. They put Quentin Spain in there, only a couple hours of prep. He joined the team on a Friday. So I think with some of their offensive line problems, you can point to guard play. It's still to be determined on who's going to get the start because they are dealing with injuries on the tackle side too. But I think it's just been a little bit of musical chairs for the offensive line. But for B.J. Finney, we really haven't seen a lot of them. And that's all because of the COVID situation and protocols.
Another thing that one constant with the Bengals backfield is Giovanni Bernard and Joe Mixon. They've had some trouble this season, but they can still cause trouble for a run defense with the Steelers that have been gashed the past couple weeks. I mean, there's the 265 yards against Baltimore, and then the 144 that Dallas put up last week. Mixon's missed the last 2 weeks with a foot injury against Indianapolis. Is he going to be healthy for this game?
We asked Zach Taylor that today. Wednesday is normally when the guys get their first real practice in. And then if they're not out there on Thursday or Friday, I don't expect them to play. He didn't practice today. He was sidelined. And the thing is, I don't know if he's going to play on Sunday. And Zach Taylor said they're going to give it a shot tomorrow to see if maybe he goes limited or can finally get full by end of day Thursday or Friday. But the next 2 days are really crucial when you look at the run game. And of course, you want to get Joe Mixon back out there. They gave him the big extension in the offseason, but credit to Gio Bernard. I know he's a different kind of running back than Joe Mixon, but when you look at the dual threat he can be, I know a lot of people think he's kind of more of a third down back, but he can block, he can run, he can pass catch. And I think we've really seen that with the Bengals offense in the last couple of games because they've been able to put up about 30 points in 3 weeks straight. I think he is a difference maker on offense, but of course you would love to have your starting running back out there. But to be determined, I think the next 2 days are really crucial for Joe Mixon.
If Mixon isn't supposed to go, who would be the running back duo for Cincinnati? Because, again, these teams got success with running two running backs, and while it wasn't the same for Dallas, their two running backs both had 50 yards apiece, and then we know what Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins did to that Steelers run defense.
I think what you look at this Bengals offense, and of course you want to get that dual threat running back out there on the ground. I think if Mixon can go, obviously Gio's going to be your number one guy, but this team is starting to utilize, and I want to go to other positions right now, they're starting to utilize the tight end position and Drew Sample. And of course, when you look at their wide receiver room, I look at it right now, and of course John Ross has been inactive, mostly healthy scratches this season, just hasn't been able to produce when he's been out there in the offense, and they need it. They need that speed to get down the field. But I think you got Tyler Boyd, you got Auden Tate out there, AJ Green too, T. Higgins, the rookie, has been really surprising, almost an underrated MVP. I think you have all of those weapons that it might just be a game where Joe Burrow's throwing it in the air. I know they have to go against that secondary, and you look at Minkah Fitzpatrick, and it's not easy. But I think I look for Joe Burrow to be putting it in the air a little bit on Sunday.
You mentioned the receiving core. I agree. It's a very underrated group. Maybe people that don't see the Bengals every week, or they're not on national television, they might not know about the receivers, but just looking at the stats and watching some highlights, they have some real talent there. And we're kind of familiar with Tyler Boyd. He went to Pitt, and he's a local Pittsburgh product. Who can cause, do you think, the biggest problems for the Steelers secondary and pass defense?
I think when you look at this team right now and just offensively for the Bengals when it comes to wide receivers and Tyler Boyd, you think he's going to step up and be the number one receiver on this team. And AJ Green has been someone who's dealt with injuries. And it's crazy because he hasn't really played against the Pittsburgh Steelers in almost 2 years to be out there. It's not the same AJ Green that you see. But I think when you look at T. Higgins and him just over the last couple of weeks, he almost, similar situation to Joe Burrow. Didn't have any preseason games, and he's really getting that chemistry with Joe Burrow. So I think a wide receiver that's really sticking out right now would be T. Higgins on offense.
I just want to ask this myself personally. Does it look like AJ Green is going to be leaving Cincinnati?
That is the $1 million question. Of course, they franchise tagged him. It wasn't something that he wanted in the offseason, but he said, hey, I'm going to do it. I'm going to show up. I'm a professional. And that's what AJ Green does. It's unfortunate because AJ, a couple games this season, he just didn't look like himself. And he admitted he got frustrated. He felt a loss of confidence. He thinks when he gets out there on the field that, I'm not the same AJ Green. I want to make those plays again. And it mentally, physically got to AJ because he's healthy right now. He's out there on the field and he's still a threat. And he's still a difference maker, but he's in his early 30s. It's a different kind of wide receiver, but I think that they drafted T. Higgins for a reason. He's not AJ Green yet. We all know that, but he's been a bright spot offensively. And I think if AJ Green comes back to Cincinnati next year, and these next 8 games are huge for him, for his resume and playing for another team or putting himself in a better contract situation with Cincinnati, I see the only way AJ Green comes back if it's a short-term contract, if it's 1 or 2 years in Cincinnati.
Well, that's a shame because it seemed like he was gone last year with acquiring Burrow in the draft. It seemed like it kind of like renewed his vigor for the team a little bit.
Yeah, I think when we talked to AJ Green, just doing all the virtual Zoom interviews this offseason, and then when they finally got Joe Burrow, he said it. He goes, I'm so happy this guy's on our team. And AJ, he's been here with a professional and Andy Dalton and just a leader in the locker room, one of the captains in there. And he really believes what Joe Burrow was bringing in there is a difference in game changer. He's like, this guy's just special. This guy's just special. And I think when you get praise from AJ Green like that, because he's not a flashy guy, he doesn't say a whole lot. But he's really talked Joe Burrow up, and I think that could help the Bengals front office get AJ Green to come back for 1 to 2 years. But at the moment, I think these next 8 games are huge for him. It's playing to next season. And honestly, I thought we were going to see that from John Ross, but he really hasn't had the chance to be on the field. The couple times he was on the field, he was dropping balls and just not the receiver that we've really ever seen in Cincinnati. I mean, he's dealt with injuries and now he can't catch a football. So it's unfortunate to see that's how his career is going to end in Cincinnati because he's going to be done in about 8 games. But I think for AJ Green, when you want to put something together, if you're not staying in Cincinnati and you get a better deal elsewhere, I think you want to get something together the second half of the season.
Well, let's move on to the defense. And the Bengals have struggled to stop the run this year. They're 29th in the league, giving up 144.2 yards per game. In total, they rank 26th in yards allowed, giving up 400.9 yards per game. What's been the main issue with the Bengals' run defense and just defensively overall?
It's just been the story for the last couple of years with this team. I think you look at some of the running backs who they play against, and it can be a backup running back, second string, third string, and they always come out there and they run over the Bengals defense. It's just this defense right now, of course, and other teams are doing it too because they want no excuse for it, but they're dealing with injuries. I mean, you look at their defensive line, and we thought in the offseason that their defensive line was going to be one of their strongest position groups. They go out and get DJ Reader. You think you're going to have Geno Adkins on the other side of him. Carlos Dunlap going to be an impact. Sam Hubbard, Carl Lawson. You got injuries. You have Carlos Dunlap, who doesn't want to be in Cincinnati anymore. He's gone. And then Carl Lawson's been the only one to be able to get to the quarterback. And I think, honestly, they want to be able to stop the run. But their biggest problem defensively is getting to the quarterback and putting pressure on them. And then if you look at past matchups versus the Pittsburgh Steelers, Ben Roethlisberger has all day against the Bengals defense. And they do have a lot of younger guys out there. I mean, you look at the linebacker room, Logan Wilson, Akeem Davis-Gaylor. They're slowly producing. And even in the secondary, Jesse Bates, one of the top, if you like the PFF numbers, one of the top safeties in the NFL. Their secondary, William Jackson III's playing for a contract. That's huge. Unfortunately, one of their free agent signings, Trey Waynes, has been injured the whole entire season, and he's on the reserve COVID list right now. So we don't know when we're going to see him in the secondary, but there are a few young bright spots. But at the moment, they just can't get to the quarterback, and it's a little combo of stopping the run and putting the pressure on the QB.
Yeah, and speaking of defensive end, Carl Lawson, he leads the Bengals in sacks 3.5. Besides Lawson, the defense, it's really a new look defensive line. Like you mentioned, Carlos Dunlap got traded to Seattle after having some issues with his diminished role. Geno Atkins missed the first 4 games with a shoulder injury and has been used only sparingly and hasn't been much of a factor. But what have you seen from the new look defensive line in Cincinnati, and how's it shape up as far as like the starters on the defensive line?
I think what they're doing right now, and it's a little different because you guys are familiar. I'm sure obviously it's year 2 for Zach Taylor, but familiar with Marvin Lewis. And Marvin Lewis was like, you're a vet, you're out there. And I don't know if he, publicly never said that, but that's what we saw when it comes to these defensive players. Zach Taylor is not afraid to play some of these younger guys. They have Khalid Kareem out there. Of course, Carl Lawson's being the most productive. Mike Daniels was supposed to be their third string out there on the defensive line. He's been able to come back after some injuries, and he's kind of been a bright spot on and off the field, but they're definitely missing DJ Reader. That guy was just a great free agent addition and unfortunately got injured a little too early in the season. But they're just they're moving it all around right now with some of the younger guys getting opportunities to really see what they have. And to be completely honest, I think we talked about the offensive line problems. If this offensive line can fix the guard play, and obviously they need an extra tackle out there because you look at right tackle and Bobby Hart's situation and Jonah Williams, they're starting left tackle. But I think you got to go heavy on the defensive line when it comes to the 2021 draft for the Cincinnati Bengals because, it struggled all season long and unfortunately they don't have any depth at it right now.
Well, they actually just picked up a little bit of depth and Takk McKinley off waivers from Atlanta. There is a history with McKinley that's similar to Dunlap with his departure from Atlanta. And I assume the next time we see him is December, but is there a possibility he could play this weekend?
Yeah, unfortunately, he won't be able to play this weekend. If it was any other year but a COVID year, there is a chance you get him in there, get a couple practices, and it's going to be a short week. But unfortunately, he has to pass around 3 COVID tests. He has to get negative COVID tests. It's a 6-day turnaround before he can even get in the building. So obviously he will not have time, but early next week he can get back in there. My expectations is he'd be there Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday of next week. But unfortunately they won't get that help going against the Pittsburgh Steelers in game one. Oh my goodness, I'm messing up tonight too. But yeah, they did get some help with McKinley about 2 hours ago. They claimed him off waivers.
Yeah, and I assume that he's going to fill in that Dunlap hole on the defense. It's just that, had you been able to see some things that McKinley did? Obviously, I seen on your Twitter that you mentioned what he did at the 2017 draft. It was a nice moment there.
Yeah, I think he brings a different kind of energy. And as you mentioned, there's kind of a similarity going on with McKinley and Carlos Dunlap. Both kind of just wanted out of where they were and what teams they were on. For Carlos Dunlap, they bring in a new defensive coordinator and he changes things up and his reps are going to change. And unfortunately, when Carlos Dunlap was out there, he wasn't producing. I think sometimes you just need a change of scenery. And I think that's what the Bengals are hoping they're getting, because obviously they have some of their young guys on the sideline. They do have Carl Lawson out there. They're hoping to get Sam Hubbard back. He was cleared to practice this week and he was limited at practice. I think they're just hoping to bring that energy. You obviously can see he posted a few things on social media recently. It's kind of a deja vu what they were dealing with, obviously with Dunlap, but I think they're just hoping to maybe a fresh start for McKinley, 2017 former first rounder, and hopefully he can add to the defensive line and help them get to the quarterback, something they're struggling with all season.
And moving to linebackers, the Vontaze Burfict era in Cincinnati is long gone, and they have a relatively young linebackers core with Jermaine Pratt, Marcus Bailey, and veteran Josh Bynes. How have they been performing this year?
Yeah, I think when you look at some of the rookie play, and as I mentioned, Zach Taylor's not afraid to play some of these rookies, and they needed help at linebacker. I mean, you look at the AFC North and being able to stop the Pittsburgh Steelers and even the Baltimore Ravens, which I feel like Lamar Jackson has had a disappointing year, and some could say it's injuries, but they knew they had to face those guys twice a year in their division and find a way to stop those offenses. So they had to go pretty heavy, and they did. I think Logan Wilson keeps getting better each week. Akeem Davis-Gaither, I think he's a little bit more behind Logan Wilson. And then when Josh Bynes was added in free agency, he's another one of those guys. And it sounds like coach speak and cliche terms, but just how he is on and off the field. 10-year vet in the locker room, someone who's familiar with the AFC North coming from the Baltimore Ravens. I think that's been a difference maker for this young linebacker room and just really has helped energize it a little bit. But these young guys are getting a shot to play on Sundays. And Marcus Bailey, I slowly think he'll start to make an impact too defensively, just maybe not in his rookie year.
Yeah, and keeping up with the youth movement on defense, the Bengals have a pretty good safety duo in Von Bell and Jesse Bates III. They also have William Jackson, LaShawn Sims, and Mackenzie Alexander as their cornerbacks. How has the secondary looked this year, and who's going to match up with some of the Steelers' wide receivers, in your opinion? I think when you look at the play from the game 2 versus the Cleveland Browns, you're not going to say the secondary did that great. Cleveland won on a last-second touchdown. They definitely got burnt. I think you're going to see, depending on how Darius Phillips is feeling, LaShawn Sims will be out there. Of course, William Jackson III to be determined on who's lining up where. Obviously, William Jackson III is their number one corner. They'd love to have Trey Waynes out there. Hadn't seen him all season long. Jesse Bates has been a bright spot for this defense. And as I mentioned before, you look at the PFF numbers, this guy's playing like one of the best safeties in the league. This team has decisions that they're going to have to make when it comes to extensions. Not yet on Jesse Bates, but when you look at William Jackson III, he's in a similar situation as Carl Lawson is. You take this 2020 season. Look, they're not going to the playoffs. Everyone knows where this team is right now. They've had a lot of close games, but this is about what you're going to get the second half of the season, what money you're going to get if you're going to extend some of these defensive guys. But yeah, William Jackson III is still their number one corner at the moment.
As Mackenzie Alexander, I saw he had some injuries. Where's he been lining up when he's been playing?
Well, with Mackenzie Alexander, he's kind of been their backup when it comes to corner play. He has been dealing with of course, the team is not going to announce it, but when you look at the wire, he was on the reserve COVID list, just close contact. He had mentioned, I don't have coronavirus or anything like that. Team listed it with an illness today. So that's to be determined if Mackenzie Alexander will get to play on Sunday.
Lindsay, what's your biggest concern for the Bengals in this game, and who do you think will have a big game for Cincinnati?
Biggest concerns, as I mentioned, I think if the Bengals stand a chance in this game, it's just not making mistakes offensively. Defensively, they have a lot of holes, and we talked about it before, some of the younger guys getting out there, not being able to get to Ben Roethlisberger, not being able to get to the quarterbacks this year. That's just something we've seen over the past couple of years with the Cincinnati Bengals defense. I think if the Bengals stand a chance, it's going to be more of an offensive shootout. This team has been able to get to 30-plus points 3 weeks in a row. Can they do it again on Sunday on the road against the Pittsburgh Steelers? Joe Burrow's first game. I mean, you want to go back to his first matchup versus the Baltimore Ravens this year. He looked a little confused. It was his worst game of his rookie year. And I think the Steelers are going to blitz him. And that kind of threw him through a little bit of a loop in Baltimore. So I think if they stand a chance, it's not making any rookie mistakes. It's not giving the ball away. That's one thing you look at the Steelers defense, what they've been able to do and capitalize on is creating turnovers. It's getting rid of the ball as fast as you can, to be determined on who gets to start on their offensive line right now, because it's pretty banged up. They will get their center, Trey Hopkins, back, so that's a great addition for them offensively. When you look at their offensive line, Quentin Spain will probably get a guard start, just the way he played against the Tennessee Titans. But yeah, I think it's going to have to be an offensive shootout if this team stands a chance, because I'm not feeling too hot about their defense, just the way they've played the last couple weeks.
We always ask our guests on the show, do you have a prediction for the game?
Yeah, I give a prediction every week over on Cincinnati.com. I think that the Bengals are going to lose this game. The Pittsburgh Steelers are going to extend to 9-0 on the season. I think you can point to Sunday's game against the Dallas Cowboys and any team that's undefeated. I remember the Cincinnati Bengals when they were 2015, when they were undefeated. They started the season 8-0, and they had some bad close games too. I think that's just what we saw this past Sunday with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I see them bouncing back just fine against the Cincinnati Bengals. I actually have it 28-20. It sounds close, but I think it might be a garbage touchdown late. So, yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
Now, that sounds about right for us, especially with last week's situation. But before we go, we saw on Twitter that you're interviewing TJ Houshmandzadeh, and the Bengals Twitter account put out that infamous, well, at least around here, video of him wiping his shoes with the terrible towel. Have you talked about him with that yet?
I did, actually. I'm going to be chatting with him this week. We have a lot to talk about, from Joe Burrow to the wide receiver room, and then, of course, this fun rivalry that he's been a part of. I talked to him in the offseason when he was working out with Joe Burrow, and I said, let's talk about this rivalry. What is it about the Pittsburgh Steelers? And he brought it up, and I'm going to have to bring it up again with him tomorrow night when I talk to him. That's a ballsy post, I'll say that, to put that on the social media. And I think sometimes, everybody loves to have a little fun with the terrible towel, but it doesn't always work out in your favor when you do. So,
I mean, I've always had respect for the Bengals wide receiver core from that time. My favorite, of course, is Chad Johnson, Chad Ochocinco, but they had a lot of underrated wide receivers, the late Chris Henry, Peter Warrick, and of course TJ Houshmandzadeh. And what's your favorite game in this rivalry?
My favorite game in this rivalry? Oh, my goodness. I want to say, and I'm going to get the year wrong in my head right now, they were in Pittsburgh, and Reggie Nelson had the interception. They called it the Immaculate Interception. And it was a Marvin Lewis, Mike Tomlin coaching mistakes kind of game, and both just kind of giving the ball back to each other. And I want to say Josh Brown was their kicker, and he kicked the game winner in Pittsburgh. and the Bengals won. I thought it was a great game. There's been games where the Bengals were on the losing side that I thought were fantastic, but unfortunately, you can't look at the last 10 games and say too many of them in Cincinnati or for the Cincinnati side were good games, because they haven't beaten this team in 5 years. Tyler Dragon is a guy I work with in Cincinnati, just started covering the team 2 years ago, and he brought that stat up to me yesterday, and he goes, "Can you believe it's been 5 years?" And I said, "Yes, I can believe it's 5 years, because I don't remember the last time this team, I mentally can't remember when they beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's how long it's been." And I say this all the time. You talked about the heated rivalry. It can't be a rivalry if one team is always winning. That's just how I feel.
How's the city of Cincinnati and just the overall the Bengals fan base? How have they been feeling about Joe Burrow? I mean, I know even prior to the draft, they had the number 1 overall pick, and pretty much everyone knew that Burrow was going to Cincinnati, and I saw fans how already had jerseys or T-shirts or whatever of Burrow's.
I will say this: when it was December of last year and they knew that this team was probably more than likely going to get the number 1 pick, when they had one win on the W column, everyone thought, you got to get Joe Burrow. Don't screw this up. Get Joe Burrow. And fans were freaking out nervous until the Cincinnati Bengals made it official. And I can honestly say, I've been covering this team for about 6 years now and grew up with a family who had season tickets. I've never experienced an excitement like this. I mean, you guys know how social media can be, win or lose, and some of the negativity on there. Fans love this guy. They love everything about the confidence, what he can bring. And I mean, goodness, this team hasn't won a playoff game in over 30 years. And they've dealt with a lot of losing, a lot of bad luck. And they're just hoping this guy in maybe the next 5 years can bring them some of those postseason or championships. But as of now, this guy can do no wrong. They love everything about Joe Burrow. And honestly, it's a little bit refreshing when you're covering a team for the excitement and everyone to really want to see what he's going to be able to do. I think this year was all about development for him and obviously keeping him healthy. But that's the biggest thing I think you can get from your rookie quarterback. And I think he's performing that and more.
He certainly reminds me a lot of Carson Palmer whenever he first came out.
I totally see that. Speaking of quarterbacks, I said it on Twitter. I have a feeling, and good to hear. I'm happy Ben is healthy, and this was just a contact tracing. But I'm here to say I've read the book and I've watched the movie, and I have a feeling that Ben Roethlisberger will be out there on Sunday.
Well, we hope to see Ben out there, and that's Lindsay Patterson, Bengals reporter for the Cincinnati Inquirer. Lindsay, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
And that was Lindsay Patterson, Bengals reporter for the Cincinnati Inquirer. We thank her for having on the show. And be sure to follow her on Twitter at LNDS Patterson. And Chris, last week on the predictions, well, let's just say we weren't very good, and I wasn't very good, and we rightfully deserve that for all the crap that I was talking about your prediction the previous week.
Yeah, I mean, I was way off too. I had the Steelers winning 31-10, and I had James Conner having a huge game. I had him rushing over 100 yards, and just that wasn't the case. The Cowboys they did a great job stopping the run, especially in those short yardage situations.
Well, hopefully we'll have better luck this week with our picks against the Cincinnati Bengals. But Chris, even though this should be a win for the Steelers, these aren't your father's Bengals.
Yeah, I mean, the Bengals, it makes sense. They're a good 2-5-1 team. They've played a lot of close games this year. They've lost 4 games where they've lost by 5 points or fewer. So, I mean, they've been playing, tough games against teams. They lost by 3 to the Browns on the final drive there. So they beat the Titans. It was kind of surprising when I saw that a couple weeks ago. So I think the Steelers will win this game, but it'll definitely be a closer margin than what some people might think.
Yeah, it's kind of similar on how they say that the Steelers are a bad 8-0 team. So in a way, it's kind of fitting that we kind of get this matchup. So Lindsay said 28-20. Chris, what's your prediction?
I think in that range. I think the Steelers, they scored 24 against the Cowboys, but prior to that they scored 26 points or more every game. So I won't say the Steelers win 30-20. I'll give them a 10-point win.
You know what? I'm going to equal that pick. It is 30-20. And what are your big performers for the Steelers in this game?
I'm gonna go with. I went with James Conner last week. I don't know. They'll have to get that run game going. They struggled the last 2 weeks, but I'm gonna go with. I'm gonna go with Deontay Johnson. I think he will have a big game. We saw a nice 42-yard catch and run against the Cowboys that set up that game-winning touchdown. So I think Johnson will have a big game. Yeah,
James Conner is gonna have to prove it for me. I'm not gonna. I think for best wishes for Connor, I'm not going to choose him as the big performer on offense for the Steelers, but I am going to say this. James Washington is going to get more catches against the Bengals. You remember last year he was instrumental with Duck Hodges at quarterback against the Bengals. He scored a touchdown in which he just stiff-armed one Bengals defender, and I just have a feeling that, he's going to have some good eating against these teams in Ohio, so he's going to start that off. I'm going to say James Washington is going to have 6 catches for 80 yards and a touchdown.
Okay, yeah. With James Conner, he could have a big game against the Bengals. I'm just not going to go there 2 straight weeks. We'll have to see. The offensive line has to play better. But as far as on the defensive side, I'm going to go with Stephon Tuitt. Lindsay mentioned that they've been struggling at the guard position, and Tuitt has been incredible this year. So I think Tuitt will have a big game for the defense. And I just realized that last week that I got that I said Minka Fitzpatrick would have an interception, and he did have that red zone interception. I just remembered that, but I had them having like 4 turnovers, so they weren't quite there.
Well, hey, at least we got one thing right last week. Aside from Steelers win.
Yeah.
But I'm also going to say that the returns on defense are going to have good games for the Steelers. Tyson Alualu has shown his worth with the past couple weeks, and I'm also going to say Mike Hilton's going to get back to form. I think he's going to get a couple sacks on Burrow. I'm really high on those two because they've shown that the Steelers really need them on defense. They still all around have good parts on there, and I think we're going to see more out of Avery Williamson this game. So, but I really think those two are going to come back in grand style for the Steelers.
Yeah. And TJ Watt, you probably could say him every week, but if he goes up against Bobby Hart, the right tackle, Watt usually has great games against him. So that'll be another thing to watch for, and hopefully the special teams, fixes their issues that they've had that they had against the Cowboys, which, man, the Cowboys, they put on a special teams clinic against them.
Yeah, I think they're going to show us something this week. Matter of fact, I'm even going to have another big thing. Ray McLeod will have his first kickoff return or punt return touchdown.
Oh, that's bold. That's a bold one there.
I'm just thinking, typically after a game in which one facet gets totally embarrassed, they come back and make up for it. So I believe that something big is going to happen out of the special teams this week. And also, hopefully, no blocked field goals, nothing like that.
Yeah. Let's hope they fix that. Blocked field goals are getting pressure up the middle. They're right off long snapper Cam Kennedy.
Well, the AFC North kitchen has a new cook in Joe Burrow, and it's going to be really exciting to see the former Heisman Trophy winner and national champion with LSU come to town. It's Steelers versus Bengals, 4:25, back at Heinz Field for Fox. So it should be an interesting game. That's all for us. For Chris Ward, I'm Ty Polk. Thank you for tuning in to the Renegade Blitz. Thank you for listening to the Renegade Blitz podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, read articles on renegadeblitz.com, and like us on Facebook. Our podcasts are available on YouTube, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify.